So as you all know, we decided to try to get some people together to ask questions, and we requested people to send them in ahead of time. And we have, I think, 7 questions, but some of them get into great length of detail. And they're I think they're pretty standard questions. For example, this one is, stop increasing our taxes. I have lived in Bolton since 2016. And my taxes have gone up 50%. I know many other residents are mad about this too. This is why your budget isn't passing. Operate in the confines of your existing budget. Also, $20,000 for a basketball court. Most locals don't even use Indian Notch Park because it's loaded with non-residents. If you really wanted to make a difference, then make the park for residents only so we can enjoy it. Then maybe we would feel better about the $20,000 piece of tar. You know, if I have to read the name or not.
No.
So,
Would you like me to address that one?
yeah, you want to start with the,
So Indian Notch Park cannot be made for local residents only because we took federal dollars when we purchased that piece of land and developed it into a park. And by taking those federal dollars, we are required to have the park open to both residents and non-residents. The $20,000 for the basketball court, I think that number is relatively accurate. And those are things that, so we actually took a few things out of the capital budget, and we are using ARPA money for those things because frankly, we thought that those were things that were better funded from other sources rather than taxpayer dollars that we collected from Bolton taxpayers. So there are actually 3 basketball courts that are being reclaimed and redone. They've been in our capital budget for a very long time. Some of them were getting to the point of being unsafe, but rather than doing that with Bolton resident taxpayer dollars, the Board of Selectmen decided to use funding from the ARPA funds that we got from the federal government to do those 3 basketball courts. Those courts exist at Indian Notch Park, the park over behind the Bolton Center School, that the old Bolton Center School that's now coming down, and the one at Herrick Park. So we took one of our written questions. Is there anybody here in the audience that has a question for the panel? Yes, sir.
Maybe not so much as a comment, but prepared statement. I don't know if you want me to stand or not.
However you're most comfortable.
this is,
Matthew Rivers, Fernwood Drive. Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you to the boards of Selectmen, Finance, and Education for getting pieces of this budget assembled and to fit together. It's a big task, and getting any budget passed, that's another task altogether. With this one proving obviously particularly difficult. My guess is that this meeting is to perhaps gather ideas to help this budget pass. And it's a good idea, it's a good start. But my concern is that the input gathered here may apply better to future budgets rather, but less so to the currently contested one. That being said, I am of the opinion, given the respective proportions of the budget they consume, that there are 2 areas that stand out as having the potential for reduction. Those being education and refuse collection. While the desire to maintain the status quo is understandable, unfortunately, current events show that that's not sustainable. The tried and true methods of the Board of Selectmen, Finance, and Education have sufficed until now, but innovative solutions need to be proactively sought, with everyone understanding that changes are necessary. Thank you.
thank you. So this referendum is already settled. There's nothing we can do.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully we don't have another one.
Could I ask for some additional feedback on refuse?
Sure.
So, we have refuse in there, and that is that is a benefit that you receive as taxpayers. And we can't reduce the cost of refuse collection. We've done a lot so far. We are working with the Capital Region Council of Governments to try to work on putting a program where we take organics out of the waste stream, because that will help reduce our tonnage, and that will reduce our cost over time. but that requires buy-in from the public who are, depositing materials in the trash as well. So that's one thing we can do, and refuse is a huge part of the Board of Selectmen's budget. We've negotiated contracts for several years out. Our town attorney actually works for SCARA, that's one of his jobs, which is a very large trash company in southern Connecticut.
Okay.
And he helped us negotiate these contracts. We worked very, very hard at this. I think it took us almost a year to assemble these contracts and get them in order. And so really the only thing we can do, I think at this point, other than as a town, find ways to reduce how much we put into the waste stream. The only other thing we really can do to reduce those costs is to eliminate it completely from the selectmen's budget, and you would pay for it independently as taxpayers. The problem is that costs you quite a bit more. It's actually less expensive, the way that we have it now than it would be individually. So I think that's something to know. When you're looking at that, it's a big number. It's a big nut. We recognize that. We've worked really hard at it. We continue to work to try to find, ways to reduce those costs.
And we would need an infrastructure that could handle the transfer stations. And I think I heard something the other day saying it cost them $700 a year for the trash pickup.
Yeah, it's yeah.
I don't know. You gotta hire a private contractor to do it.
A town like Andover, right, would do that.
They
don't
do
have,
that, right, yeah.
Right, so Andover has invested a lot of money in their transfer station, so the people that actually bring their garbage to the transfer station. And we would have to do a lot of rework of our transfer station. It would also cost more labor hours because we'd have to be open more. It would be a different class of licensing with the DEEP. Right now, we're just a transportation, it takes solid waste. We're not taking garbage. So those would be expenses that we would have to incur in order to be able to have residents be able to take, household trash to a transfer station. It would require a lot of infrastructure upgrade.
Is there,
Right, piggyback on that a little bit, that when we had talked about the state, and basically the idea is that the residents are gonna, they have to pitch in order to reduce costs for things or to meet some of these solutions. The residents have to step up a little bit too. So reducing the food waste, some portion of it, it's not that hard for people to do if they choose to do it. And it's hard to change people's behavior, but it was more to make a statement that that there are solutions or there are some things that can be brought to bear to help reduce some costs. And it wasn't to change the contract, it was more about other innovative solutions.
Right, I mean, and the more we can do to, to positively recycle, and the more we can do to remove organics from the waste stream. And that, that could be as simple if you have the right kind of yard, doing some composting, until we have a program in place that allows you, different methods of reducing that organic waste in the trash can.
so I got another question on here. What is the proposed projected mill rate for 26? That just got posted today, right? I think it was.
It did, yep.
And that is 32.97 from the current rate, which was 32.74, but the actual effective mill rate previously was 30.84. So essentially it's going up 2.15. 13. So, and the next question, what percentage increase is being proposed for the Bolton, the BOE budget for 25-26 versus 24-25? And what are the primary reasons for the increase? Kristen's not here yet.
She is.
Oh, she is. You want to grab that one, Kristen?
Sure. Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me tonight. I appreciate it. So with the current reductions that have been made by the Finance Committee, totaling $482,382 to the Board of Education's budget, the budget request now sits at a 1.72%. Or $284,364.
These are the questions we got by email.
Thank you.
And last year's increase was a 2.71% increase.
What has been done and what could be done to reduce the Bolton school budget for 25-26? I don't, you gotta find out where you are first, right? Before.
Well, yeah, so if I could offer just a couple of things, Rodney, if I could, I did share with the Board of Education at the last board meeting last Thursday that based on the current level of cuts, my recommendation to the board for the cuts would be as follows. The initial cut of 230,000 for the first round, we were able to offer up because we had salary savings totaling $89,591 from new hires. And we had finalized our insurance number along with our open enrollment. And we had some life changes that actually went in the favor of the board, totaling $140,409. So that total was $230,000. In addition, to get to the $482,536, it will be my recommendation to also cut a 1.0 administrative assistant position, which was just vacated a month ago. The person left the district, and to cut a vacant 1.0 paraeducator position. And we also have some recognized savings in our outplacement costs for special education due to an outplaced student who just moved out of district. And that totals the $482,536.
You want to explain open enrollment?
Certainly.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I can do it if that's or do you want to?
No, go ahead, Kristen.
So every year,
It's so hot in here.
Again, I turned it up to 78. I'll turn it down to 1 cold.
In sentence?
It's very hot.
Tell me if you want it cold.
Yes, I do.
Okay, you're good.
sorry, there was someone talking, they are not muted. Every year, after we receive our insurance number, we have to wait for the final rates for medical, dental, and vision. Once we have that, we have to offer up open enrollment to all our employees. For employees to either choose to come onto our insurance, they can make changes to their insurance. For example, we had someone make a change. They were a single person, they just got married. So now they're a two-person insurance plan. We have people who brought their family on. Maybe they took insurance just for themselves, and maybe the husband and the kids were on the husband's insurance and they decided to come on our insurance. So once we have all of that information, we then know what our total savings will be. And just so everyone knows, we don't just take a stab in the dark at our insurance number in terms of what people are selecting. We send out a form every fall and ask people to give us their best projection for what they intend to do with regards to insurance. So are they going to stay the same on the plan? Are they making a change? And if so, what do they intend to change it to? Are they going to come off the plan? Now, we can't hold them to it, but it helps us for budgeting purposes to really have a better sense of capturing exactly what we're budgeting for.
So it's a little bit of a moving target. It's not too bad.
Yeah, so we don't have the information when we start building our budgets, which is what Kristen's alluding to. We don't know what our rates are. Somewhere in the beginning of our budget process, we get a best guesstimate from the insurance company. So this year, their best guesstimate at the beginning was that our insurance rate would increase by about 13% for health insurance. And then, when we actually get the numbers, sometimes it's not until after the vote has actually happened. This year, we actually did get them kind of surprisingly early, and we ended up at an 11% insurance rate increase, which is, compared to what we've been increasing the last couple of years, it's high, but compared to the free market, because we're with the state insurance plan, it's really less volatile than the open market.
So
To be honest, if we went out to the open market, like we used to be Bolton, the town of, and the Board of Education, we do our insurance together. And we were with Anthem when I first came to Bolton, then we moved to Connecticut. And one person getting really sick could increase our insurance increase to like 25 to 30% because we are such a small entity. We then developed a insurance collaborative with other small communities and districts. We did that for a few years, and then we still weren't really big enough, and we had some very high claims between the entire group. And our not to exceed number that year was something like 28%, which is what then caused us to move to the state partnership plan, which covers a number of school districts and municipalities across the state. So it's a much larger bargaining unit in terms of insurance numbers. So that is really our best option for health insurance to be anywhere in the ballpark of being affordable.
So just so everybody understands, the school system has how many employees?
I think we have like 148 or something on health insurance, something like that.
And the town has another,
About 50.
so we're into 200 people here, 200 and plus the families. So it's not easy to collect all this data. And just in the event, nobody knows, this is Ashley Phelan, Board of Ed. Ross Lally, he's on the Board of Finance. Amanda Gordon is on the Board of Selectmen. Rhea Klein is back there. Chris Davies is back there. So we have several board members here if you have any
Rob,
questions.
Just ask whoever Mark is online to please mute themselves because we're hearing their dog.
We're gonna mute them for you.
Is this you?
Thank you.
Of health insurance. The other thing that has been shared with me by a number of residents is there's a perception that the health insurance that's offered to our employees is just, too rich, I suppose, too favorable. So Chris and I, we did spend some time talking about that. And the notion that we pay 100% is not true at all. The employees certainly, share in that cost of the premiums. And I understand it's quite comparable, if not a little less favorable as compared to benchmark other towns and other schools. So I did want to clarify, I originally thought when I joined the Board of Ed that, we paid 100% of.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay,
I could say on the town side, depending on the bargaining unit, our employees are paying anywhere, I think, between 12 and 18% of their cost share for their insurance, which is, yeah, and I will also say this, when we had the Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield, that was a very premium health plan. It simply got unaffordable. And so the employees had to make concessions in the healthcare program that they adopted, it was mostly equal, but not quite as good as, it was not quite as robust. It didn't cover as much as the Anthem program that we had. And this is a healthcare program that requires employees to be proactive about taking care of themselves so that overall the costs are reduced. That was not the case with the Anthem plan that we had. It was a PPO and it just covered everything with fairly low copays. It was considered a Cadillac plan. But we moved away from that Cadillac plan probably 6 or 7 years ago. And we now have a very good plan, but I would say it's certainly not a Cadillac plan.
That perhaps is where their perception was coming, that was 6 or so, years ago.
go ahead.
Sorry.
This is Amanda. I just wanted to elevate a point that Jim just made, that there are bargaining unions involved. And so while with a private employer who may get an increase, may pass that expense off on the employees, that's not something that the town and school can do, right? The portion of the premiums and the cost need to be negotiated as part of those union contracts every time those contracts are up. So it is a fair bit different than the private business market that a lot of folks are used to working within.
Okay, the last question on here is, what has been done or can be done to encourage new business to come to Bolton and to help to reduce the tax burden on homeowners? So we're working on trying to get water up Route 44. The state might pass this housing law, which who knows what can happen with that. Our planning and zoning department is working through their regulations, trying to make them easier and more attractive to businesses. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think, that's the tough part is we have sewer, but we don't have water. And without that infrastructure, the housing piece of it makes it really difficult. Especially. And, it also makes it less attractive for businesses that might need that infrastructure. We really appreciate the business partners that we have in town, like Simonize, and Simonize is a great community partner. You see that they do a lot for the town. They do things for the school, they subsidize the concerts on the green. But they're buying water every day. They're buying water from the town of Manchester. And all of the businesses that we do have on that small section of Route 44, almost all of them have public water supplies. And when you're a public water supply with a private well, that's an additional cost that you have to bear as a business. So this is a vision of the Board of Selectmen. I think it was about a year and a half ago, the Board of Selectmen had a retreat and they talked about the things that they'd like to accomplish. And this is one of the things that is a vision for them, is to be able to bring a water line in from Manchester. I can tell you, we've had meetings with the town of Manchester, several of them. We've asked, our state legislators to give us some money for us, to complete a study as to what we need to do and what it would cost. I don't think that was funded in this legislative session, but we'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to work with the town of Manchester. And we've also, the town manager from the town of Manchester was also going to reach out to Coventry and see if they had interest in partnering with the other two towns on this. Because if we do it as a region, the grant monies that we get will be much more favorably looked at. And we're trying to pay for most of this with grants.
Chris?
Just to piggyback on what Jim was saying, I wanted to ask, can you give us a rundown of some of the businesses in town that are either new or have expanded in the last 10 years? Because I can think of like 5 or 6 just off the top of my head.
Well, why don't you start then?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, we have a new Bolton Mobile. Able Coil has a brand new building. Within the last 10 years, Simonize expanded their facility greatly. Bolton Dental, new building in town. Dollar General, love it or hate it. It's a new building in town that's providing taxes. That's fairly significant growth and development over the last 10 years, I think. So taxpayers should know about that and understand that progress is being made. It's just slow, in part because Bolton has so little commercial and industrial land to develop. And 2, yes, there's a lot of talk about planning and zoning and the regulations being too difficult to work around, but it's also the case that Bolton is just tough geologically. So many of the parcels that are available have ledge or other features that make it really difficult for a commercial or industrial use to come in and make use of the land. We have unique features that
You
good or bad.
sit on a bunch of rock, basically.
And that was a great response to your question.
So the M&M is open too, down on Route 6, the old M&M. I don't know what it's called now, but
We don't have much empty space. I think everything is full at the moment, which is great.
and I think they're putting in a drive-through, aren't they? They might have a drive-through in there at Dunkin'.
And the gas station on Route 6
Yeah.
that sat, empty for the longest time, that is now reopened, revitalized.
So what does that add to our tax base? Why is that, resident, why is my taxes dipping down a little bit? The increase.
So the assessment that was done a couple of years back, the commercial properties they fared much better than residential properties. They didn't go up much at all.
They're giving tax breaks.
No,
No,
It's just their assessment.
just the market.
Demand for commercial properties went down during COVID. Demand for residential properties went up, so we saw decreases in commercial, assessments, whereas you saw 35 to 50% increases for residential properties. And so, I mean, that's something related to the bigger market picture that we as a town and as boards have zero control over. And Jim, I just wanted to ask if you could clarify for the public, that plan you were talking about that we're trying to get funded by the government to get water up Route 44. What are they estimating that's gonna cost?
Depends on whether we put a water tower in or not, you know, on the low end, it's probably $3 million. On the high end, it's probably 5 or 6.
For just the plan?
No, for the plan, about $500,000 for the plan,
Well, it's gonna change, right?
correct.
I mean, we're talking about substantial barriers to making progress, right? Moving forward, bringing in revenue costs money up front. So in order to even move on that project, which could ultimately bring in revenue, we'd have to invest at least $500,000 for a study plan design, and then an additional.
Yeah.
3 to 6
Which
million.
is why I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just gonna say a lot of the grants that we're talking about, they require matches by the town. And some of them also, we have to spend the money up front and then we get reimbursed for it. So if we cut the budget too much, then we're cutting off our ability to have monies available to bring in new businesses to go and apply for grants and then exercise those grant monies. So this is where it's a really difficult balancing act. And there's no one right answer that makes everybody happy because we don't have unlimited funds. So in order to give somebody more money requires taking money away from a different area. It's really as simple as that because we don't print money the way the federal government does. And so that's why it's a really difficult thing. And we really appreciate your input on this because otherwise we're flying in the blind. But that's really the challenge here is how do we keep the taxes down low, respecting, that because I pay taxes. I have a small house. My taxes have gone up just like everybody else's, particularly because everybody wants small houses now. So mine went up like doubled in value. My little Cape, 1,000 square feet. It's almost $400,000 now. It's crazy, but that's just the way the market goes.
As I said, I saw Rodney out front, right? It's like his meeting, but all that money in our houses is fake money now. 20 years ago, you were making money. Now it's fake money because I can't sell my $300,000 house without getting another $300,000 house. It's not like I'm really getting anything extra.
No.
But 20 years ago, absolutely, that was very true. So just because our house values go up, doesn't mean we should be, I said to Rodney, I had 3 vehicles. I sold one last year, so I don't pay taxes to be quick. Just don't want to pay it.
Yeah. And
So we're gonna use that reduction to go against your future tax.
But as I said, I'm losing money because I said, okay, I can't afford to have that car anymore.
But that's one of your options and thank you for exercising it,
Well, there has to be cuts because we make cuts in our own.
that's exactly right, yeah.
That's what I said.
So the water thing is in the works, we're trying.
And we're gonna try to, leverage as much state and federal money for that as we can. And, if we want to spend taxpayer dollars on it, you'll all get to vote on it.
So it's a tricky situation though, because we're gonna have to get the water from Manchester. Manchester is even looking to see if they have enough water for us. And even if we do get it, will they have enough water pressure, et cetera, for sprinklers? And that's where local businesses will do better because you can go up more than 2 stories if you have sprinklers. People can't build without
And your
them.
insurance rates decrease significantly.
There's a great benefit to it, but it's several $1 million and can we get it through the notch up to Coventry? That way that whole area would be available for water and sewer, I think. They got sewer up there.
Sewer goes all the way to the Coventry town line.
But the sewer part, so we got a loan on that, right? And there's only so many available units of sewer that we can put into it. So we're kind of limited on how many units we can attach to this thing. So there's a lot of variables. I don't know if the gas is limited though, is it?
Yeah, I don't think the gas is limited, but the natural gas doesn't go all through town. It's, it's fairly limited where
Right.
it is, but it is in that
It's
in that
commercial
area.
zone.
Right.
Yeah, which is good. So, we're setting it up, it's being set up slowly. but it's not identifiable right up front, but it's coming.
And we're still paying debt service on the sewer, and we're still paying debt service on the gas line. You know, those things are coming off in the not too distant future. So that's good news. The bad news is at some point, we're gonna need to put a new roof on the Bolton Center School. Where unfortunately, it's at the end of its life.
And the debt service on the high school edition is 32.
Yeah, I think that expires in 2032,
So,
and we still have a fire truck that we have to pay for.
so
The
Yeah.
debt service on the high school, you said, is up on 3032. If it ceases to be a high school, is it due and payable at that time? Has that
No.
question ever been answered?
No, we borrowed money as a town.
Yeah.
For the construction of the high school, so
Okay,
that doesn't change the term of the loan.
okay. So it could cease to be a high school right now, and it wouldn't be due and payable. We still have to pay it off.
It wouldn't be due and payable immediately.
Well,
You-
Jim, I think one thing that needs to get answered that I don't know has ever been answered to the question that has been raised is that the town received
Grant
reimbursement
money from the
monies
state, yeah.
from the state of Connecticut because they were building a school. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. And I think that's something that probably needs to be looked into.
That's a good, so in case anybody didn't understand, so when the high school was built, you know, it cost X number of $1 million. Let's say it was, you know, $20 million. And the town of Bolton has a reimbursement rate from the state of Connecticut. So although we probably
And I think it
initially
was
borrowed,
56%, Jim.
so about 56%. So about 56% of the total cost of that was paid for by the state, you know, through an education grant. And the rest is what the town of Bolton bonded for. And what Kristen is saying, and I don't think anybody here has the answer to this question, is something we should figure out is, you know, if it ceases to be a school, what happens to that 56% that we were given as a grant? So does it maybe need to stay a school until 2032 at the very least?
or we pay it off,
Or we pay it all, or we assume additional debt.
or we keep it school.
So it's a question to be answered.
It is. And the other thing, if I could just, and I don't know, Ashley, if you want to speak to this part about the analysis that was done about the cost of the high school.
Sure. Yep. So with all this feedback, you know, we certainly did, you know, with Kristen, our superintendent tech's input, help put together an analysis of what it would cost if we were to regionalize, send kids elsewhere, shut down the high school. And the analysis showed, I mean, we have to still continue to educate, you know, our kids. And at this point in time, it's still cost effective to have our own school. But of course, I think it's prudent just to continue to monitor what those trends look like. And, you know, these types of questions as well. So we did do that analysis, but I do think it's important to continue to refresh that analysis.
I think that's a great idea. Is it possible to get a copy of the analysis?
Sure. We can work on pulling something together.
I'd also like to offer up, I found a document that was put together by a district in Oswego, New York, where they were having similar problems with funding, you know, around their schools. I think they were potentially looking to consolidate or something, but they had a group of people get together that had a vested interest in the school system and reducing the budget for the school system. And they came up with literally 17 pages of possible ways to reduce the cost of education. I'd be happy to share that.
That would be great. Yeah.
They're just ideas, that's all.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any questions in the room? Oh, yeah,
Actually, I want to talk about the decline in enrollment of the high school, the school system overall. When my kids were in school a long time ago,
Here in Bolton?
yeah, 30 some odd years ago, they brought kids from Wellington into this town to go to high school. That was a tremendous change in the atmosphere of Bolton High School. Now, putting a plus on it, we had those kids here. That contract eventually, for one reason or another, went away. Then we started bringing choice kids, which was even a bigger plus for the school system in this town, mostly because of diversity and kids could see what other people live like out there. And it's still a good program, but that's declining. Well, we have Columbia kids coming here. That's declining. And my question, I guess, is when they decline, the revenue declines.
Mhm.
Right, so they're not paying tuition for these kids. I know, until in 2021, choice funds for $400,000 in this town. I don't know what they are. I couldn't figure out what they are this year, but I know they're a lot less than that. And is anything being done? Find out why Columbia kids aren't coming here, and why is choice enrollment declining? We have room for these kids, and then those kids come money. It's found money. You know, you're not costing any more to bring these kids in the regular budget. That's found money. It was that way when the Wilmington kids came here, and it's that way now. And I think, you know, you're starting to hear that I've lived in this town for over 50 years. And we fought a battle a long time ago when people in this town wanted to close our high school. And one of the reasons people moved to this town is because of that school system. Not why I moved here, we didn't have kids then, but it's a, people who live over our neighborhood, a lot of moved here because of the school system. And if the school system changes, you know, the property value is going to drop. Just gives up, you like a lot of. But my question is, what's being done to try and improve those numbers for both Columbia and Choice Street?
Sure. So Kristen, fill in the
Would you like
gaps.
me to-
Yeah, broadly speaking, I would say this is a huge focus area for the board. I can't tell you the number, you know, we focus on those numbers every single meeting. We've had a lot of, you know, healthy debate over that in really trying to figure out what is driving that. And I'll let Kristen kind of give some examples as to what the specifics are. But with Superintendent Heck retiring, obviously our new superintendent coming in, it's one of the priority goals for, you know, Mr. Caruso as he comes in, because it's certainly top of mind for us. But maybe Kristen, if you want to give some examples of, you know, what might be
Sure.
driving the most recent, you know, declines with Columbia, you know, Choice, et cetera.
Yep. Barry, is that you? I think I hear you, that voice. Okay. All right. Thanks for the question. So let me start with Choice first. So back when, Barry, I don't know what, like 25 years ago, Bolton was one of the founding communities taking choice students. And back then, it didn't matter where you lived in Hartford. You could select a school and go to that school. Within the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years, they went to a zone system. So we're zone 2. So only those students in Hartford that live in zone 2 can select the Bolton Public Schools. If they live in zones 1, 3, or 4, they cannot. So right there, we took a hit because we had kids that wanted to come from other zones. In addition, a number of districts around us, Coventry, Ram, Tolland, have also now opened their doors to take choice students, and they all draw from our same zone, zone 2. Having said that, though, we still are above the average number so that we receive the maximum amount of monies for each student. And our budgeted amount for next year is $380,000. So not that much off of the $400,000 that you spoke of many years ago. I hope that answers your question about, and in the meantime, we do a lot of PR. We attend events with incoming parents, potential parents, and students in the choice program to try to, you know, encourage them to come to Bolton. Having said that, now with regards to Columbia numbers are down. They have decreased over the years, just like Bolton's, pretty much just like everybody in Connecticut, with the exception of South Windsor, where I live. Having said that, for many years, Columbia, my understanding, was not opening their doors, if you will, to magnet schools and to really promote technical vocational schools as well. The Commissioner of Education a few years back sent a memo to all superintendents reminding us that we have a statutory obligation to open up presentations to all types of offerings for high schools. So really before for Columbia, it was go to a technical school, go to Bolton High School. E.O. Smith came on as a partner, and Wyndham Tech. But now they have many, many more options as well. When E.O. Smith came on as an option, it was shared with us that a number of Columbia students were choosing E.O. Smith because of its proximity to UConn, because of its large field presence in their athletics program, and the ability, I'm just being honest with what we were told, to walk across the street and go out to lunch and not have lunch in a cafeteria when you're a junior and senior. So, and to be able to take courses right on the UConn campus. So, those are things we cannot change. One thing the board could look at and has looked at previously and had made a decision at that time to not do it would be to simply open up for tuition students from other districts. But that itself is fraught with some potential issues with regards to the cost of special education, and how that would impact the cost of education in Bolton. So I just share that as what has kind of gone on in the backdrop. It isn't for lack of trying. It is dictated to us when we are allowed to communicate with Columbia 8th grade families and 7th grade families. And we have to go by what they are allowing us to do. But, Joe Maselli this year did a great job of being able to connect on social media with families and try things that way to try to encourage participation. This year, we opened it up to 8th grade students if they wanted to come and participate in the musical production this year. And we had some takers on that.
Okay, is there any other questions on the Board of Ed in reference to the enrollment?
A huge focus item for us, so.
I think, can I just say one comment? Because we've heard this discussion so many times about the schools. And I think the big piece that people forget really is the charter schools opened up. And I think with that environment, I can tell you one child went to Bolton, one child did not, of our 2 kids.
Mhm.
And he would have went, our oldest son, to an aeronautical science place. And so people keep saying our school system is losing people, but it's because there's so many more opportunities now with the charter schools. There were none when my son went to school, same age as Ashley. We won't tell him how old, right? Ashley. But still, it's different now, and those poor school systems are fighting against charter schools, other schools. E.O. Smith, which I heard gets funded significantly more than other schools by pretty reliable source. So it's hard for us to compete. So we have to make a decision to keep the school and try something else. I don't see a solution.
Yeah, it's really hard, but do I think that value is still here? Absolutely. Why am I back here? Why did I choose to move back to Bolton? I have 3 kids going through the elementary school, phenomenal experience. So like that value is there. It's a bit of a hidden gem. It's almost like having a private school of your own in town, but unfortunately it does cost, more. So it's,
Yes.
you always say this, Ross, what do we want to be, as a town when we grow up, or, in a number of years, it kind of have to decide.
For years, we tell people, our kids, a private school education in a public school. Both. And a lot of my kids are all high college now. All these kids that you see not once a month, they still talk about Bolton High School, especially Bolton High School. And a lot of them, none of them come back here because they can't afford to buy a house in Bolton anyway, but not, I should say not, but most. But, and my kids even talked about that, is about the quality of the education and how much it helped them when they went to college. How well they did. They all did in college was because of what they had involved in. It's a jewel of the town. And then, I don't know, I'm gonna be here for the rest of my life. I don't ever wanna see that school closed.
So it's gonna be a long,
Could I just
Go
offer
ahead.
something, Rodney, if I could, to Barry and Ashley's point? Bolton High School this year was awarded a Connecticut School of Distinction by the Connecticut State Department of Education. I think it's a handful, 5 or 6 high schools in the state of Connecticut were awarded that, and that is based on our student data. So that speaks to the work of our teachers and our students and the great learning that is happening at Bolton High School and preparing kids for the next part of their journey. And Bolton ranks in the top 3 statewide.
so there's benefits to coming here.
We might not have a track, we might not have this, we might not have that, but it's all what you make of it. It really is. And
And there's 3 kids going to college on track scholarships. You know, so
The population's small enough that you can be in the varsity team.
oh, yeah. Walk right.
So, yeah, we appreciate anybody who's got any good input on that. You're welcome to bring it forward at any time. I'm hoping Kristen can do some schmoozing in South Windsor because their high school can't handle the number of kids that are coming in, so maybe she can get them here. Because it's not a very long bus ride.
It's an excellent school, but it's this town.
So is there any other questions here?
One question, this is gonna sound a little off.
Yeah.
But the house we bought next door to the town hall. If homes went up so much, I'm gonna toss it out, because people have asked me this in the town. Why can't we sell that house? Because as we understand it, tell me if I'm wrong, there's a lot of storage in there in our resident troopers, and that's it, right? That's what.
So I don't think there's not any storage.
No
There's no storage. The second floor of the building is empty. It's just our resident troopers on the first floor. So I'm gonna answer your question with another question. Where would I put my resident state troopers?
Well, Rich used to be in your office, Jim, just.
But we're literally busting at the seams here at Town Hall. So, it's, when we've, with the tear down of the Notch Road Municipal Center, which really wasn't viable anymore, we're paying rent for a temporary building until we have a permanent solution. So, it's an idea, and it's not one that we haven't thought about and discussed, at least maybe not publicly, but certainly behind closed doors. Rodney and I have chatted about it, but the question is, what, we don't have enough room for our staff now. Our staff is fractured, working in different buildings. It would be way more efficient to have our registrars are in the same building as us, or our finance department in the same building as us, but that's not in the cards. So if you got a great idea about where we could,
With the Port Ed on the side there. You have to have a.
yeah, they have to, there are things that are required. I don't think that would work. Because they have to have, a private entrance, there's a number of difficulties, I think, that would be created by trying to do that.
There a reason the second floor is not being used for anything?
It was built as a house, and it was built as an old house. And for us to be able to use it for offices, it would take a lot of physical upgrades, which would be very, very costly, because when houses of that vintage were built, people didn't have much stuff in their rooms, right? I mean, they had a bed probably, and maybe a dresser or a wardrobe cabinet. Today houses are built much more robustly, but the building doesn't meet the required codes as far as weight is concerned. The stairs, I think, would be problematic.
ADA compliance.
Great idea. Well, the first floor is generally ADA compliant, if you would address it from the other side of the building, but yeah, those are all
You
issues.
basically have to gut the whole thing and redo the whole interior with structural improvements.
And it's so historic, you'd have to spend
Yeah.
barrels of money in there.
As
Plus,
someone who operates an office out of an old building with stairs, those stairs cost us $300,000 in a workers' comp claim this past year. And so, you know,
Yeah, no.
it sounds like it saves money, but unfortunately, something like that could become a liability.
I think, I don't know why that building was purchased. How long ago was that? Probably 10, 12 years ago?
10, 15.
Yeah, and it was, I think it was bought just to be part of the campus with the town hall. I don't think it
I think
ever had an
I
intent.
think it was longer ago than that.
It was.
Cause I came to work in Bolton in 2007 and we owned it then.
So it came up for sale and they just nabbed it. It's-
After we moved here, because we actually voted on it, and we've been here since 2004. So
Wow,
it was
okay.
So
definitely,
somewhere between 2004 and 2007.
So I'd have to look back to see what the intent was, but
I think the intent was probably for them to use it more than it's being used. Because
Like-
basically you need one room for the residents and
Right.
probably a conference room.
If-
That's a big house to use. That's probably worth 500,000. With the market that's changed.
I hope it's worth a lot more than that.
You do hope so.
Looking out for the town.
It would need a, building would need a lot of work.
So
Yeah, you couldn't,
not,
wouldn't it work?
not seeing any questions, can we discuss the money that came in as a grant for the Notch Road for a moment? And what we did with that? But maybe they don't. So we had a budget to demo the Notch Road facility, which was 1.4 million, I think it was. And we got a grant for 1.2.
Well, it was federal money for ARPA, American Rescue Plan.
Right, okay, so we got the 1.2 million, we had to invest some. And upon going out for bid, the bid came in at 900,000. And so we had to find projects in town that fit into the ARPA their requirements. So you couldn't go out and buy trucks, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. But we could have our basketball courts repaved.
Because it's recreational outdoor, in particular, it's outdoor recreation.
So the money we're using for that, the basketball courts, we're putting a new generator at the school, the middle school, because that powers the well, which powers
Which is a public water supply for the school, for the senior center, for CVC, for the temporary building, for the highway garage, and the buildings and grounds garage. So it is a very significant public water supply. The existing generator also does not cover their refrigerator and freezer at the Bolton Center School, and we've lost product a few times, and during hurricanes, we've shifted product physically from the Bolton Center School over to the high school because the high school's refrigerators are on a generator. So the generator is in need of replacement. It's unreliable to some degree, and it's certainly not big enough and has failed us a couple of times with regard to our public water supply, which requires energy at all times, because if you lose power, then what has to happen is you have to sanitize the entire system. And if you think about what that means getting sanitizer into a 10,000 gallon holding tank, getting sanitizer to every tap in every one of those buildings I just mentioned, letting it sit there for a period of time, and then flushing all that sanitizer out. So that was one of the projects also for the ARPA money.
Yep, and then we're,
Water expenditure as well.
What's that?
That's a big tap on the aquifer as well.
Yeah.
so we also are putting in new doors and handicap access to the Notch Road meeting rooms. We had the Notch Road meeting rooms, the floors taken up, the asbestos removed, and we're putting carpet down. Now that was all with ARPA money. We're putting air conditioning in still, right?
We don't have all the numbers yet, but we had a little bit of extra money that we're trying to invest in these improvements through the Stanford Wrecking Company and those discretionary projects, if you will. You know, we're trying to provide some better cooling in there than window shakers. Trying to put in the new doors and ADA access into and out of all of the exits from those rooms, A and B, as well as the senior center. There's a door in the front of the senior center that goes out. And all of these things just make a difference for all of the things we try to do in those spaces. So that's very positive. So we mentioned that we're doing 3 basketball courts. We did buy a new UTV for the fire department with those funds, and their old UTV went to the Buildings and Grounds Department because the Buildings and Grounds Department had on their wish list for a future capital improvement to replace their aged UTV. So we were able, to move that UTV from the fire department use over to there. And we did a project over at the farm where we removed the old manure pit and got that filled in and did a little bit of regrading beside the driveway. So those were all done with federal dollars. Man, did I miss anything, or is that, I think that's all of it.
So the fire department's UTV, they kind of require that because they take care of the East Coast Trail, or which one's that?
Well, they have to respond to that, but they also respond to Case Mountain a couple of times a year. And one of the reasons they wanted that replaced is because during the spring and fall, they use it to fight forest fires or brush fires.
Right.
But other times a year, it's used for going to remote locations for medical calls. And they had this like 400-pound thing that would be in the back of the truck. They'd have to remove on the back of the UTV. They have to remove the pump, and then they have to put the
Gurney in.
put the rescue basket and other stuff in there. And so now they don't have to do that. All of that stuff is on there permanently. So it makes a huge difference. And, Amanda mentioned workers' comp claims before, so we're at less risk for a workers' comp claim from lifting that heavy equipment off the back and moving it. We're able to respond better and more quickly.
So I'm just bringing this up because it's not really taxpayer money. Well, it is, but it's federal taxpayer money. It's not. So, these projects all got done. We had to pay 20% of the grant money.
No,
No,
not with the
Not a
ARPA.
thing. Okay.
No.
So the Notch Road facility is gone, and all these other improvements were done.
We got an allotment of money from the federal government for ARPA. All of those projects that we talked about are costing us $9 over what we are getting from ARPA.
So, and then in addition to that, we got another grant for a soccer field at Herrick Park. That came in, it was a $500,000 grant.
Roughly $500,000.
And we gotta pay 20% of that.
20%. So that project will be going out to bid probably here in the very near future. And when it goes out to bid, we'll know exactly what our 20% cost is. But right now, we've budgeted for 20% of that $500,000.
So
Since we have fields at the school for the same purpose.
we don't have enough soccer fields. Our soccer fields are full all the time, and sometimes they're not able to be played upon because they've been used too much in wet weather.
So
So this is something that's been needed for a very long
I
time.
can jump in there, somebody who lives on the soccer field. So you say necessary, it depends on, I guess, who you're talking to. So if you're talking to somebody who has no interest in soccer, probably not. If you're talking about, a large population of our town does play soccer. Kids don't play baseball here. They go to Manchester. So soccer's a huge draw here. We have a lot of drainage issues with the other Herrick Park soccer field. So I think they first looked at maybe can we just fix the drainage with the existing ones, but it was just best to do a new field at Herrick Park. And I know there's a lot of challenges at the high school with the drainage there too. So yeah, I asked the first question, can't we just fix kind of what we have? But yeah.
And I think some of it also, you need to rotate the fields to do
absolutely.
maintenance on them, because when one's torn up, to have the grass replanted or other work done on it, then where do the people who were using it go? So it's part of rotating it.
And we do need to try to keep these kids saying what great fields they have to other kids. And they're the future of the town, so.
But those fields are constantly being used, summer, spring, everything, so.
And that'll give us an opportunity to maintain the other ones. So, is there a question?
Well, I emailed you a bunch of questions, but I do have,
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
have the email somewhere and
Yeah, well, I can,
there's a bunch of them in there.
Right.
I guess one thing I'm wondering with the new, which I didn't have a chance to read. It says that you're still proposing a 6.9% increase in taxes over last year. Realistically, I'm not sure you're gonna get that passed. So when it doesn't pass next week, what are you going to have to cut
well,
more?
I'm not on the
Or-
finance committee.
We don't, I'll speak, I'm chair of the, Ross Lally, I'm chair of the finance committee. The finance committee looks at, I can't speak for them because we have members from the public at large, we have members from the Board of Ed, and we have members from the Board of Selectmen. So what we will do is, let's say it doesn't pass. We'll do the same thing that we did the last time. We'll take a look at, okay, since we did the last one, has either the Board of Ed or the Board of Selectmen found any other surplus revenue for this year? You know, monies that have not been spent, those get used to next year's budget. They are applied to reduce the mill rate, but they don't really reduce the spend. We're just covering more of what you would pay in taxes by moving some extra money from this year to next year. Then we take a look at like, okay, as you know, Kristen Hecht had mentioned, they were able to have some people retire. They had some new people come in at a lower rate. You realize some additional savings for personnel moves like that. You also may get some grant monies. And so we look at all that. And then those monies, that's how we start with it. And then the next step is, okay, do we, is that going to fly? And if not, where do the other monies come from? We don't have line item veto in the finance committee except for expenditures from the capital improvements budget. Those we can pick and choose items from. Otherwise, we collectively put our heads together and say, okay, we can take this item or more out of capital improvement, and then we'll do, okay, this is how much is coming out of Board of Selectmen, and this is how much is coming out of Board of Ed, and then the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed go back and figure out how to make that happen and what the cuts are. I don't like this way that we do it because you guys don't know what you're giving up.
Right, exactly.
So I wish we would do it differently. I don't have any say in it, but that's what my challenge is because I feel that in some ways, it sort of looks like to folks like, okay, we go through this drill every year, nothing breaks. What happens when we get to the year when it breaks and you think it's not going to be any different than the last time and suddenly you're not getting your garbage picked up anymore? We don't have after school sports or something. And you didn't know that's what was coming as a consequence of wanting the budget cut.
Personally, I would love to vote on BOE separately from town budget, but that's.
Yeah, so
Well,
I'm just.
it was that way once upon a time, but it got combined, and I think the only way that could happen, I think,
Charter
would be a
reviews.
charter change. Because right now, the charter requires that we vote on them together.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think, Kristen can probably talk a little bit about what might, I think she already addressed it a little bit, but she might be able to talk a little more about what might get her, what her recommendations to the Board of Education would be if they get cut. I can tell you that, from on the town side, we have a pretty lean budget, and we put all of our budget worksheets up on the town's website for you to look at. So you can see what went into building our budget, and you can pretty much see where about every dollar is being spent. But there are things that we do that we're not required to do by statute. And that is things like keeping Indian Knots Park open. Now, we did decide to open it with the caveat that we may close it if we have to make budget cuts to the selectmen's budget. We're not required to have resident state troopers. We're not required to provide trash pickup to the town residents. We're not required to give seniors rides to doctor's appointments. Not that I would want to see a reduction in services because I don't think the services that we give are that robust, truthfully. But, those are the things that we're not statutorily required to provide for the taxpayers. So those are the conversations that the Board of Selectmen and I would have. And it would be very difficult for them to decide what they were gonna cut. Ultimately, I think it would depend on how much of a cut is required. And one of the things that, I wanted to say, Ross mentioned that monies that we have left over from this year's budget, go to offset what we ask of taxpayers in next year's budget. But we continually try to tighten our budgets. And, one of the things that we don't have is we don't have a huge account, for contingencies. So there are some things that are built into our budgets that are worst case scenarios, like, on the Board of Selectmen side, we budget around $5,000 a year in emergency management in case we have that bad storm that we've got to respond to. That way we're not looking for money to figure out what we're gonna do. We budget a little bit for overtime for our resident state troopers. We don't always spend it. If we budget for overtime for our buildings and grounds crew and our town crew for plowing and storm cleanup, this year we didn't use all of it. So those monies go back and people might look at it and say, well, you're over budgeting. We're trying to be responsible with our budgeting and not budget more than we think we need. So we're not budgeting for worst case scenario, but we're also not budgeting for best case scenario. So, those are the things on the Board of Selectmen side that we would have to consider very carefully about, what cuts there were. And again, I think it would really depend on how much was cut. This year, we are asking a lot of the taxpayers with regard to the capital budget. And, some of that, I know on the Board of Selectmen side is vehicles. A plow truck is about $220,000. And so what we did is we initially had in this year's budget, a whole plow truck. Where we decided we would cut the whole plow truck and put it into 2 years and do some repairs to our plow truck to make it last a little bit longer. It was really in pretty rough shape. But fortunately, we have a very gifted mechanic who is also a gifted fabricator. And he's done some really amazing things with that truck in the last 3 weeks since the first budget failed. I said, you got to make that truck last another year. And he's been going at it. So, we also have a vehicle that our building officials and other town people use, other town employees use to go to seminars and things like that. That vehicle is 14 years old. We've gotten our money out of that vehicle.
Mine's 13 years old and 30 years old, and they are still going strong with $2,000 worth of repairs instead of buying a new one.
Yeah, this one is not. We're having a difficult time getting parts for it. That was the last breakdown we had with it. And it's rotting away. I mean, it truly is rotting away. So we've truly gotten our money's worth out of it. We have almost 200,000 miles on one of the vehicles that, carries our seniors around. And it cost us a lot of money in breakdowns this year. We had to transfer a lot of money into that account to make repairs to that vehicle. So those are the vehicles that, we're looking at, in the town budget this year. There are vehicles in almost every department, not department's not right, but there are a couple of vehicles assigned to town hall. There's vehicles for plowing roads. There's vehicles that are being used to maintain buildings and grounds. There's vehicles at the school system. There are lawn mowers everywhere. And we share equipment as much as possible. There are pieces of equipment that the school uses that are owned and maintained on the town side, and there are pieces of equipment that the school owns and maintains that we share. There are pieces of equipment that we own together, like, we have a lift to change light bulbs in the gymnasium. It also changes light bulbs at the fire department and makes repairs in the high bays. That's a piece of equipment that we own together and we share. We move it back and forth. So we're not both owning equipment that we can share.
Right, so now looking to the capital plan, it's over $1 million this year. It was 800,000 last year. There's 5 vehicles listed in here. I can tell you, my salary increase was less than 2%. So for me to give you guys a 7% increase on my taxes means I have to cut things out of my own personal budget. So this is extremely difficult when I see a capital
Yeah.
improvement plan that's going up
What's
over $1 million. to over $1
what's our minimum amount that we have to do?
1%, isn't it?
Yeah.
A mill.
It's a mill.
mill.
Correct. Yep.
So by charter, we're required to carry 1 mil capital improvements every year. Just so that the town doesn't fall behind on maintenance and improvements. Like, if you don't do them, you end up with a notch road building where you have to just junk it because it's not worth fixing. The number that you're looking at, that million, 400,000 is for the middle school.
Energy management system at the school, and it's phase 2 because they've already done a piece of it.
So every one of these classrooms has a valve in it that talks to this system, and they've been failing, and they're very expensive to do one at a time. So they're trying to catch the system up to itself. What is it? 150 of these things in there or something, and they're constantly failing. So they've been working on this.
And the new system doesn't communicate well with the old system, so they're trying to just finish it up in one piece.
You want to jump in on that, Kristen?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, we have spent a lot of money this year trying to fix every time the problem would arise. And, you know, it's 35 degrees outside and it's 55 degrees in the classroom because there's no heat because it's failed. So it's been an extreme hardship at Bolton Center School. And it's something, and we've had a lot of discussion about it at Finance Committee and the need to finish this project so that we don't continue to have these really terrible issues that impact learning for kids and a working environment for the staff.
And then, yeah.
I do just want to say that, one, I understand that the mill rate increase is a 6.9% increase, but I want to be very clear that the budget is not increasing by 6.9%. At this point, for the next referendum, the budget increase is 2.8%. And that's because of a decrease in revenues at the same time there's an increase in expenses, right? So unfortunately, the two are not equivalent. The budget and your mill rate increase do not equal each other because of the factors that are going into play. The other thing that I will say is that the money that we carry over from one year, and I'm hoping I'm correct with this, so if I'm wrong, I apologize, but the money that we carry over from one budget into next year is optional, right? The Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed choose to take those monies and apply them to next year's budget, that revenue that money that wasn't spent. We could instead be putting that money into the rainy day fund. And I was just looking at a small town budget, specifically East Granby, who has a policy that every year they put a 10% padding on their budget every year to go into their rainy day fund. The reason being that improves their bond rating so that when they need to go out for bond, they get more favorable rates, right? That is something that we are foregoing as a town right now to try and make the budget work for people, understanding that it's impacting our future ability to take on debt potentially, right? So like everything is a give and take, everything is a balancing act, and we're trying to look at all of the pieces and make the best for the town. If I misspoke about anything, Jim, please let me know.
I think you nailed it.
Now, I get that the budget itself is going up by less than that 7%.
Yeah.
However, your revenues are going down. You've lost $700,000 in grants, which means my taxes are going up by more than that 2.8%. And I'm saying you're asking a lot if you're telling me my own personal property taxes are going up by almost 7%. I can't vote for that. I can't approve that. With a capital improvement that has 5 vehicles in it, at over $1 million for capital improvements in 1 year, I can't prove that. And I'm seeing 10% increases on line items within the budget that's higher than inflation. That I can't understand why it would be higher than inflation.
Do you have a specific line
Yeah,
item you'd like to talk about?
Um,
And the other challenge too that we have, I'll just mention, is the Board of Ed's budget by state law cannot be reduced except under certain circumstances below the approved budget from the previous year. So once we reduce, that to say we only have like about 250,000 or more that you could cut. And then if you want to cut further after that from the school's budget, everything else comes out of the Board of Selectmen's budget.
my questions had nothing to do with Board of Ed, because I.
No, I'm just telling you the balancing act that it fits with
Are
it.
you Rebecca?
You got
It's right there.
the town clerk going up by, I don't have any buses. This is it.
Yeah, that's the.
Town clerk going up by 11%. You've got land and use going up by 24%.
So I get, let's take
Going up by 11%.
let's take
They're
a,
all higher than.
well, but 11% in the probate budget is not a lot of money. Right, the probate budget's only around $7,000. So 11% of that is actually not a lot of dollars.
Yeah.
But so let me address the 24% in the building and land use. So building and land use is going up by 24% to cover salaries of building officials. But for the first time in the history of Bolton, building officials are costing the taxpayers nothing. Because we are outsourcing services, we are shared services, we are providing building official services to 4 other towns beside the town of Bolton and getting income that offsets all of those expenses. When I first started here in 2007, I came to you as the chief building official. My salary was more than we collected every year in building permit fees. We have, by regionalizing those services and outsourcing those services to other towns, we have made that so that that is a net zero cost to the taxpayers of the town of Bolton.
Making money on it.
For the building officials. It is still costing us money for the clerk in there. And that's where some of the vehicle usage comes in. And, so that one is very easy to address. And I think it's a great example of the things that we are trying to do here in Bolton to reduce costs. The other regional service we have is a dog catcher, right? We regionalize that with the town of Vernon. That costs us about $6,500 a year. We have a shared assessor between the town of Bolton and the town of Willington. So those are the kinds of things that we are doing to try to reduce costs to the taxpayers in the town of Bolton.
Yes.
I think I'm very confused. I think partly we get in this position because we have done so many cuts in the past and have not kept the capital funds up, not kept the rainy day fund up. I think those are really important things that we have to do, or we just are going to be finding ourselves in this position again. There are always certain things that, like you said, it just happens to be that the vehicles have to be replaced at this time. Putting things in capital budget right along in a large amount, we wouldn't necessarily be in this position today, but we have to pay for these things. To be a functional town, you have to pay for these things when these costs come up. If we can do it more on a consistent basis, then it will hit us less like the natural, putting that off for so many years because nobody wanted to pay for it. Things only get more expensive the longer we live on things. So I do think that it's very important to keep up with the capital funds and the funds.
Thank you. Did we get to any of your questions yet? So,
Yeah. I think this is a one to cover. So our town lost more than 700,000 in grants. I think might be able
It's
to,
actually not a grant.
right. So maybe if you can address that.
That was this if grants lost. I know.
So we lost about $750,000 in revenue because our mill rate was higher than the motor vehicle tax cap that was set by the state of Connecticut. And the state of Connecticut was essentially making the town of Bolton whole. By the following year, we would get a check from the state of Connecticut for that amount. Well, because of reevaluation last year, our mill rate dropped significantly, and we were just almost equal with the motor vehicle tax cap set by the state. So we did not get any revenue from that this year. So it really wasn't a grant, but it was revenue that, you know, we're not getting anymore.
In FY twenty-three, our mill rate was 43.99, if I recall, and the vehicle cap was 32.46. And so that gap in difference, that resulted in around $750,000 in the next fiscal year. There's always a year gap,
That's based,
unfortunately.
that's based on 50 million in car taxes.
Right.
It's only on the car tax, not on the
Right.
It was only on the car.
just car tax.
Based on- Right. So then last year's gap went like less than a mil in between our mill rate and the car tax. So we're only getting 17,000 this year, the year after, right? So now this year, quite frankly, right, if we end up going, I don't know what we're at right now.
32.7. Well, we're almost even with it.
Yeah,
I think.
so in theory, the revenue we're gonna get from the state could be even less
Yeah.
in next year.
But it's a huge hit in this year's revenues.
But
Yeah.
you're right in pointing out that that is a huge part of the equation for the budget cycle. It is, but
But
so
it's hard
we
for
have to make
everyone
up.
to have to make up the difference, and you're still asking for more money.
Had it,
But that's no fault of the.
had it been known,
I didn't say it was.
maybe some of that money would have been put away over the high years, the high mill rate years to save for the low years, but how do you predict it? You know, that would have
Yeah.
been,
It's,
so just keep your eye on that, Paul, because the state is trying to get rid of car tax altogether. And that would just move
And that's just
everything.
gonna move everything to property taxes.
So,
So I guess moving on,
Yeah.
so the next question, please explain why the town administration budget has increased by 100,000 since 2024. What's in there?
So the town administration budget would have actually gone down this year, except we have a couple of placeholders in that budget. A grassroots effort by a group of residents has been working with the Board of Selectmen, trying to raise the salary of the first selectman. And so there is a placeholder in that budget for selectman salary increase that is still being worked on. Nobody has decided, you know, if that will happen, what that will be. But we have held one public informational meeting, I think one,
Yeah.
and there will be another one later on in the year. There is also a placeholder in there to outsource payroll services. We're trying to work on some things to create efficiencies within our finance departments, both at, the hope is both at the Board of Ed and at the town, so that we can increase efficiencies rather than hire more staff, or, you know, there's other things that we need to get done within both of those finance departments that we are having a difficult time getting to.
So would you
So-
view that as an upfront investment?
That's an upfront investment, and we hope to realize some savings over time.
If we do that, will this amount of staff remain the same? Is this above and beyond the staffing level? Would there be a reduction in staff?
We don't see that there would be a reduction in staff immediately. There are some things that we're trying to put in place. So one of the things that wasn't done well on the town side is we, both with the school and the town, we went to a financial management system, if you will. It's called Tyler Technologies. The school smartly from day one got all of their key staff onto the Tyler system. They got them as users so that they can do all of their bill paying, their purchase orders. They can do all of that online. The town was not as smart as the Board of Education on the town side. It did not do that. And our staff simply don't have the time to do that right now. My staff and I in the town administration department have been working directly with Tyler, trying to help with some of that. But the idea is that by outsourcing payroll services, we'll get rid of paper timesheets. Because we, you know, both Board of Ed and the town, at least at some level, are still using paper timesheets. We get rid of paper altogether with purchase orders and payment requisitions. It will certainly help me as the town administrator to be able to just log into that system every day and look at who needs my approvals for certain things. I can also in real time look and see what's happening with each of our accounts. So it's easier to, overall holistically manage the budget and what's happening. There's a lot of purchase orders that go through that I don't see because they're under $700. It's, our financial policy says that our supervisors can approve anything that's under $700. After $700, I have to see it. I would probably see more of those things if I could see them in the Tyler system. So the straight answer to your question is, I would not see an immediate reduction in staff on either the Board of Ed finance team or the town of Bolton's finance team. As we create greater efficiencies because of the time that we free up, that is certainly a goal that we would have, is to, find ways, at least, through attrition, maybe, somebody retires and we don't replace them, or we don't replace them with a full-time person. But it's a step in a process. We have a process that we've laid out and we're thinking about it, that we are trying to find ways to create greater efficiencies within the departments that we have. And this is one that both the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, and myself all recognize as something that's very key to our future, and ways that even if we don't reduce staff, we certainly can increase efficiencies, and we can be better at what we do because we have the information at our fingertips.
So is there an additional cost for the selectmen side, the administration side, to join this, Taylor, Tyler, whatever?
So Tyler, was something we already have and we already paid for. The school is using it and the town is using it.
So there's no extra.
There's no extra cost. The extra cost would be the cost of the payroll system.
Okay.
And that cost for year one is about $28,000.
So another big rise in cost this year was the cybersecurity insurance.
That was last year. Well, cyber insurance has gone up from,
We have to do.
cyber insurance has almost doubled in price every year. Cyber insurance is almost, so we're working on that right now. We have quotes from a couple different companies. We actually have one quote that's a little lower than what we paid last year, so I'm really excited about that, frankly. And here's why, right? We've invested, both the school and the town have invested a lot of money in cybersecurity upgrades. I mean, to the tune, between us, probably like almost $180,000 over the last several years. We've gotten all of the really scary stuff taken care of. There are cybersecurity threats. Cybersecurity is an ever-changing landscape. The cyber criminals find new and interesting ways to try to come at us every year. So there are things that we have to do every year to make things more secure. But instead of being at an oh crap level, we're really vulnerable. We're at a level where we can say, okay, we're really maintaining at this point and addressing the needs for what's happening in today's cyber landscape, rather than having to spend all of this money on upgrades.
I would also offer to that point, Power School, which is our student management system, which is used across the country and all across Connecticut as a student management system. They were hacked this year, and as a result, all districts that use Power School had a potential breach issue. And had we not had Novus Insight in place as our IT support, and they have been instrumental in our ability to maintain our cybersecurity insurance, we would have had a real big problem.
So, as everybody can imagine, it's 1 minute to 7. Time flies when you're having fun.
Some good questions, bro.
A lot of good questions, now we discuss this stuff at public meetings constantly, all the time. If you find that that's totally not available for you, then is this a better format? Because we could go on and on for another hour, I think. Sure. Because we get a bridge we could discuss, and that I'm trying to sell.
I was gonna say, those are course.
There's actually a bridge.
So
No, there's actually a bridge project in our capital budget.
So
Says,
I'm sorry?
that bridge is already in process, right?
No.
Oh, it hasn't been.
So we've, you know, I can really quickly say this because we have about a half a minute left. We've applied for a grant for the Lyman Road Bridge. That bridge has started to show signs of failure.
Yeah.
Okay, and we really want to address it before it fails or gets to the point where we have to close the road. We don't want to do that. So we've applied for a grant, and it has a 20% match. It's about a $1.7 million project. And it does not pay for design costs. So we have to pay for the design costs. So we split that out, as I remember, into 2 years.
Yeah. 170 apiece.
Yeah.
Yep.
For the, because by the time we get the design done and go out to bid, it's gonna be 2 years anyway, so we've tried to divide that over a couple of years, but the largest percent of that, which of the 1.7, you know, hopefully we'll be able to get a grant for.
So every time we apply for a grant, we have to make the match. Do we not apply for these grants? So it's not, somebody's gonna give you $500,000, you gotta shell out 100, what do you do? So, yes. Okay. So, yeah, we have another grant application out for a handicap van.
Right, so one of those vehicles that you talked about, we also have a grant out for, you know, we're hoping to get it funded by the grant. But we don't have a response from either of those grants yet, and those grant applications have been in for a couple of months at this point. So, you know, we're hopeful that we get a grant to cover that van. And part of it's already being covered, by ARPA funds. I want to say $15,000 of that van is being covered by ARPA funds, but the rest of it, we're trying to get covered under a different grant. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, everybody, for participating, and if you guys want to do it again, you know how to find us.
I'm truly excited by the turnout we got here, too. This is really.
Thank you.
To understand where people's heads are at too, you know, as we go, so.
Want to
Really
thank
helpful.
Kristen for showing up, Ross, Amanda, our board members, Ashley, and
Thank you, everybody.
thank you.